Lindy Hoppers and also overseas Lindy Hoppers.
Hello.
This is Agent A, Anthony. Agent J. Agent J.
Okay, Agent J.
Stephanie. And this is Sing Lim.
Hello.
And of course we have our special guest,
Lennart Westerlund from Sweden.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
as we all know, the JWL group and slash blog is only it's less than 2 months old, so we're really honored to have an international superstar today with us.
Yeah, that camera. So Mr. Lennart, welcome on behalf of JWL. Welcome to Singapore. Hope you have a good stay and hope you come back more often so that we can learn from you. We shall start our very first and simple questions. How do you get into dance in the first place?
I mean, first of all, I never grew up with dancing or music or anything like that. My home was very silent. My father had been a sportsman, so I did a lot of sports when I was younger. And I looked upon dancing as something very female. And I didn't want to do something that I felt was female, because at that time I was more into sports. It was a lot of weightlifting, swimming, running, you know, a lot of things. And I wanted to be a man, not do dancing, which was female. But also the dancing of the 70s to me had a female approach to it. It had the air was a little bit female when it came to dancing at that time when I grew up. I moved to Stockholm, which is the capital of Sweden, in 1980, and at that time I had built up a little bit of an underlying interest for dancing without knowing really what dancing was, but I had in the back of my head a plan to maybe start to dance something, and I had seen someone doing what we in Sweden call the jitterbug, which is a Swedish 50s kind of dance, and I knew there were classes in Stockholm where you could learn those things. So I went there in February 1980, and that was the beginning for me, and I liked it from the very beginning. It was 50s kind of music, it was a 6-count dance, but it was a lot of young people and a very enthusiastic leader he was a good dancer, and he spread a lot of good vibrations around the dance in a way. So I found myself a partner after a while. I started to compete a little bit. There were competitions with quite many couples at the time. So that was the beginning, but at the same time, at that time, I mean, it was a hobby for me. I had no intention to make it into a kind of professional thing. I had an ordinary job at the time, and I did it for fun, maybe 2-3 times a week. But that was the beginning, and that was a dance. It was not the Lindy Hop, but it was a relative to the Lindy Hop.
Relative to Lindy Hop, which is
a cousin, maybe. A cousin, something like that. Not really close to the Lindy, but not too far out there either. So that was the beginning. And we thought at the time, and I thought, okay, this is the 50s culture of America. That's how we looked upon it. We thought it came out of the 50s music, and that it came out of white American culture at that time.
So you mentioned you were doing another job before you started doing dancing professionally. So what did you do? I'm curious.
No, I had a lot of jobs in the 70s, but then my education is economy. So I worked at the bank. Technically, I took care of rich people's money to invest them in different directions. So that was the job. But when dancing came into the picture, I felt that I was wasting my time at the bank because I felt some kind of passion for dancing. I felt this is interesting. And that, of course, was after discovering the Lindy Hop, the African-American 20s, 30s, 40s kind of dance. Because before that, as I said before, it was only a hobby. But when I found this material and we went to America, then the picture changed. Then it became like a fire inside. I have to do something with this. I don't want to let it go to waste. And it was very exciting to find it in a way, because it was like, I guess the same thing, those guys going to the pyramids in Egypt and they dig into them and suddenly they found a big coffin. What is inside the coffin? I think it was a similar feeling we had at the time, because no one did it. So you found the old-timers and you spoke to them, and suddenly the picture started to become clear. So it was very exciting, the whole thing. And that changed my perspective upon my job, and partly my perspective on life also. What was important in life? Was it to sit at the bank and do this, or was it maybe to do this and open up the doors a little bit?
What year was that?
I would say the big change was 1984. från 84. We had met the Lindy through books in 1983, but it was 1984 when we saw it for the first time in the old films, and we met some of the old timers. So 84 was the key year. It's more or less exactly 26 years ago. It was in May we traveled to New York to try to find it. Whatever it was. Okay.
So how did you get started to your involvement in Harang? Because Harang has been around for 28 years itself.
But
Yeah.
before, does that 28 years include before Frankie years?
Yeah. Harang dance camp. First of all, when I started to dance, I mentioned this. I took classes for this man. His name was Lasse Kühler. He was the star at the time. He had danced in Sweden in the 50s, and he was like an artist in a way, a very enthusiastic person. But around him there was a society called the Swedish Swing Society. It was a club for people that wanted to compete in jitterbug at the time. So I joined that club, and that was the kind of very beginning of the whole thing, to come into that club and then realize that there was a lot of other young people that wanted to do this kind of dance. And that society, Swedish Swing Society, they started the camp activities in Harang back in 1982. At that time, someone from, I can't even remember who, but someone from the society had found a dance teacher in New York. His name was John Clancy, and he was a white man from, he was maybe 70 years old at the time, and his background, from what we knew at the time, was that he had been running a dance school in New York during the 50s, 60s, and he had been teaching something called the jitterbug or the Lindy or something like that. So someone had the initiative to bring him to Sweden, and then we didn't know where should we take classes from him. And then someone came up with the idea, maybe we should have a camp for a week, and we go somewhere, not too far away from Stockholm, but outside of Stockholm. So John Clancy, he was the reason for us to start Harang Dance Camp. And it wasn't me starting it, but I was a part of the organization the first year. So I was there as a student, technically, but I was also helping out with things because I was engaged in the Swedish Swing Society at the
How
time.
many people were at that?
We were 25, more or less exactly, I would say 25.
And now we have 3,500.
Yeah, it has grown a little bit.
A little bit.
But I mean, there were no plans. At the time, we looked upon it as a one-shot thing. It would be, John Clancy is here, let's have a camp. But then people liked the idea of it. So the year after, we decided to run this camp, and then some more people from all over Sweden had heard about it, and they came. So then maybe, I don't know, maybe we were 100 people the year after.
Oh.
And during the 80s, then the camp stayed with between, I would say, 100 and 200 Swedish dancers every summer. Yeah. So it was for 1 week in the beginning, but in the later part of the 80s, it had become 2 weeks already. But with 100 students maybe each week.
Where did y'all sleep?
No, it was there was a kind of it was a kind of place at that time for where youths could hang out
Yeah.
after school and so on.
Yeah.
So most of us, we slept in that place. I mean, not all of us, of course, but it was a fairly big place.
But
It
it
doesn't
was-
exist anymore.
Oh, I see.
So many people slept there, but we also slept in Folkets Hus, the main
You just
building.
put down mattresses,
Yeah, it was mattresses all over the place. I mean, there were no evening dances, there were no bars, no cafes. It was nothing. It was just that we rehearsed,
Yeah.
and then we put mattresses on the floor when we needed rehearsal. So it was very simple, very basic. And some people in tents, of course. And also, there was a small hotel in Harang at the time.
Yeah.
So some people, the upper class dancers,
Where?
they stayed at the hotel.
Where was it?
No, it was 300-400 meters away from Folkets House, along the main road.
And it went out of business? I can't believe it.
No, the owner, I don't know.
Maybe
The,
they started again.
the story is that the owner put it on fire because he
Get money.
wanted the insurance money.
Oh.
So then the place disappeared in a fire. I don't know if the story is true, but I think he ended up in prison anyway. So
So we can start another hotel.
yeah, technically, welcome. I mean, you're welcome to do an investment here. So there was an old hotel in Harang at the time.
Right.
So as we know, Singh invited you to Singapore in memory of Frankie Manning, who would have celebrated his 96th birthday this year. So I was wondering, how did you manage to meet Frankie in the first place, and how is he in person? Because maybe a lot of us in Singapore have met him, but like me and Anthony, we have never met him. So we're wondering what he's like in person, and how did you find him in the first place?
I mean, the first time I saw him, I mean, on a film, that was when I saw Hälsa Poppin in April 1984. At that time, I didn't know any of the dancers by name or something like that. But that was the first time I saw him. But then when we came to New York in May the same year, 84, we knew about two of the male dancers. It was Albert Mintz and Leon James. So those two we had the names of. So those were the guys we were looking for when we came to New York. But one evening there was a memorial concert for Count Basie. He had passed away, I think, early 1984, and his band played a memorial concert. And at that time there were a lot of the old-timers there dancing. And Albert Mintz, he was there. But also Frankie, Chaz, Norma, Billy Ricker. It was a lot of the old-timers that were at that dance. But because we didn't know about Frankie, we only knew about Al at the time. Once we saw Al, of course, then we stayed with him. And we didn't pay much attention to the other old-timers because we didn't know much about them. But that was the first time I saw Frankie. But I never spoke to him as far as I remember. And it took, I would say, a few years after being in New York that I understood who Frankie was. And that was through Erin Stephen Mitchell. They had met him at the time. And we had a little gathering in London, October 86 probably. And Erin and Stephen were there, and they told about Frankie. So then I understood, oh, Frankie was also in Hälsa Poppin, and he had been one of the key persons.
In fact, he was.
Yeah, he was. But when at that time Al had already passed away, and Leon James, he died in the 70s already, so we never met him. So when Al passed away, we didn't know who to ask anymore, because we didn't know really about Norma Frankie. But then Erin and Stephen told me about Frankie. So in November 86, I called Frankie from Stockholm, and I explained a little bit who I was and what I was interested in. And in February 87, I traveled to New York again. And then I had made kind of an appointment to meet Frankie. And we spent some time. I didn't chase him around like we had done with Anne. But we met a couple of times. He invited me to his home, so we spent some time there. And then we agreed upon that he should come to Sweden in the summer of 87. So that was the first time we asked him to show up in Stockholm.
How was he in person?
It's always hard to describe a person because you can look upon a person from a lot of perspectives and so on, and it's sometimes also for me to find the right words in English is very difficult. In Swedish it's difficult, and in English even worse. But Frankie was, to me, he was a very good person. I've always liked Frankie a lot. And it's hard to say why, but I think it came out of, he was a kind of gentleman to me. He really was a gentleman. He was always kind of nice. He was always kind of willing to help you, to support with things. He was like a friend from the very beginning, even though he was 75 or something at the time. I mean, he became like one of us, and we were 25, 30 something, most of us. And he became just another friend, and there was never a difference. He was so easygoing. He just stepped in. He wasn't a person putting his nose up in the air because he had danced in Hälsa Poppin. He was never like that, never. So he was always very humble, down on our level, trying to help. A very diplomatic kind of person. He didn't want to discuss controversial things. He kind of navigated a little bit like this, I felt. But in a nice way. He was able to do it without giving a strange vibration around it. He was very good at being this kind of person. And I don't know if he did that on purpose or not, but he had that ability to always be kind of, it was comfortable to be around him all the time.
So what's your fondest memory of Frankie being in Harang?
Wow, that's a tricky question.